The Morrison brothers were pining in the Franklin River in the 1940s.
The timber in the Franklin was some of the biggest and the best timber that I've ever seen, I think. The old hands had worked that river in the earlier days. Massa Doherty and Charlie Abel had worked with them, and they took most of the stuff that was easy got along where they could fall it into the rivers or up steep places where they could fall it and hope it would hit trees and canter into the river and smash the heads off it and all that sort of thing. And a lot of them, they left behind, not a lot, probably 8 or 10, where they'd fell them off a cliff probably 15 or 20 foot high and they'd speared into the ground. They wouldn't be bothered trying to cut the limbs off to free them because it was almost standing perpendicular. But we did get 3 or 4 of those lots of logs. And yeah, big timber, the Franklin. 1,500 to 2,000 feet was common to get logs, and up to 2.5, and some odd ones was 3,000 super feet of timber in them.
Beautiful boatboard timber?
Yeah, very, very good timber, boatboard timber it was, and but I built the JLM out of some of the logs that come out of the Franklin as well.
Before Morrisons began the logging operation in the Upper Franklin, Ron and Reg decided to take the punt upstream through the Deception Gorge, or the Great Ravine, a feat that had never been attempted before or since.
It was a pretty rough old trip. We left Strawn with the boat and the rowing boat to do this trip, and got up to the camp at Butler Island, and then of course we loaded stuff necessary that we were taking with us in the punt and started off. And you got about 20 or 30 rapids to get over into Franklin before you get to the Franklin Gorge in the Deception Range, and we got there towards late evening and we slept on a beach, a sort of a gravelly beach with the gear and the stuff in the punt secure, and made a bed, and we had the tent pulled over us while we were sleeping in case it rained, and of course it did start to rain, but it didn't rain a lot, so we had a good night's sleep, and we set off next morning to do this trip. Once we got and seen the gorge, we decided that we've got far too much stuff to take through the gorge. We had a jack, one of the old Tawella jacks, so we decided to leave that, and we left a coil of wire that we were taking, and several cases. We left a case of meat behind and stacked it up on clear of the river, and we set off up the river. And it was a pretty tough journey. No one else apparently had ever been through the gorge in a punt before, and I forget how many times we unloaded the boat. I know the boxes that we had with us, we had to end up putting all the tin stuff into the oat bags because the box was getting wet and shifting and shaking it and started to fall to pieces, so we had to put them in oat bags and back it up. But we had, I think it was a half a side of bacon, a half a bag of flour, 2 cases of meat, a cross-cut saw, blocks and tackles and different stuff, and it was a bit silly really to have taken all that stuff with us, rather than we could have packed it out the other way. But anyway, I forget how many times, dozens and dozens of times, and up over huge rocks as big as this house. Going through some of the parts of the river, the rough ones, it was important. The boat was your main thing. Lose the boat and you just about lost yourself, because once you got in a certain part of the gorge, it was nearly impossible to get up out of it, and it was nearly impossible to walk one way or the other. So that the boat was the most important thing to make sure you kept us safe. We used to cut skids and lay them to haul the boat along, and one would get up on the rope and the other one would get behind pushing or so forth and shift skids or whatever had to be done and get it up over. But we did it that often that I think we just about wore the boat out. On several occasions we went very close to losing the boat, crossing dangerous places. And another place where we did nearly lose it, where we were hooking up around a reef where the water was flowing, and it sort of, it was a ledge run out into the river, and we had to be very careful. But I was all on the boat, but being deep water out in front, I had a job to hold her, and I had to let her go, and Ron, when he let go, because she went down and coiled and went in underneath the ledge as she boiled in and filled with water and went straight down. But of course we'd shifted all the stuff out of the boat, even the forward and aft thwarts out that we used to stack the stuff on. And I think we were nearly an hour before that boat came out of there. We tried to pull it out with a rope, but we couldn't do it. Sometimes it would come a bar of the way, and other time, then all of a sudden we were having a spell and she just boiled out. So we were lucky, but when she boiled out, there wasn't a grain of sand in her. It was as clean as you'd ever see anything. If we had lost that boat, I doubt whether we would ever got out of there. It was so high and so rugged and steep, and we certainly had tucker that we never ever tried these sort of things with anything in the boat at all, in case something like that did happen. But in the case, supposing that you'd broke a leg, I don't know how you'd have got on. One could never have gone down the river again in the boat, or up, or walked out, I don't think, to get help. So I just don't know how we'd have got on. We had to get the boat up the Franklin to the Mount Fincham, to where we'd previously prepared a camp, and without the boat in the Franklin, there was no way you could shift backwards and forwards or downstream or upstream or across the river to cut timber. So it was important that you had the boat up the Franklin River up to where the camp was. Without the boat, we could have never have got the timber that we got.
And the reason you needed the boat, it was easier than walking along the river bank. The river bank was so rugged that it was easier to row up and down, obviously.
No, it wasn't really.
No, well, you tell us.
No, well, we just had the boat to shift, camp, or cross the river.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. We cut tracks down, say half a mile or a mile, either ways, and we used to walk where we could. Well, a lot of people did doubt that we ever went through. I know, and we were running tourists up the Gordon River, and we bought dozens and dozens of these boats, skis or whatever they call them, rafters, up, and they'd ask me about it and say they'd heard that we'd been through it, and they'd always have a sultry grin on them, much to say, I doubt that very much. So I used to take them and show them the boat and ask them to pick up the end of it. And very few of them could pick up the end of it. You took that through there? I said, yes, we did, with a lot of stuff in it. But I don't know whether they ever believed me or not, but I don't care whether they did or not, because we did it.
In the smaller tributary rivers, which were difficult or impossible to supply by punt, including the Jane River, Upper Franklin and the Sprent, to name but three, walking tracks needed to be cut through the forest to these logging operations. Track cutting could sometimes take weeks. Nielsen's had to cut a track over the King Billy Range to access the Sprent River below its confluence with the Percy.
We was a bit poor like and looking for new fields to make something out of it. And the grindings, they were already there, but they hadn't been there for long. And we used their track up until it branched off where the grindings had their work in the lower reaches of the sprint, or in the middle reaches of the sprint, and we went up the top end. It was always the norm, like, to ask where they wanted their territory, and then you had to go either above them or below them or anywhere at all like that. Then of course we had to cut another track which went up higher, and of course we had to go over the Kingbilly Range to get up higher. It was just the normal track cutting. It wasn't a good footpath or anything like that, but it was just a rough track. You couldn't spend a lot of time on cutting good tracks. Sometimes you had to get over logs, sometimes you had to get under them, and you made the best of it, what there was there. Oh, it took us 6 weeks or somewhere around about that time to cut the track into the sprint.
Once the track was cut, all tools and supplies had to be packed in on men's backs, and often in very steep country.
My weight was around about 80 pounds, but Charlie able to carry 100 weight, old Charlie. He'd carry 100 weight. Oh yes. And to pack food, the packs was made out of sack bags, and Charlie was a professional at that. He'd make your pack bag, and he'd make the straps out of the bag and all to go on you. Each side had each strap had on the back had a piece of wood, a little round piece of wood to keep the strap from, so it wouldn't come in on your neck, on the bag. It was in the bag. And the bag was cut in such a way that the one part of it flapped over the load. And if it was raining heavy, you put your flannel would go over the top of the pack to keep the food, the flour and everything. So you never put flour next to your skin. You pack tin stuff next to your back, and not bloody potatoes or onions, for God's sake. You pack the tins down so they fit in nice in on you, and when you start to sweat when you're climbing up. Where we went over, where I bought that boat out, you've got to come to that yet. Where we bought the boat out, you could grab one another's feet in front. Now I could grab your foot in front. Yeah, Charlie'd cut foot marks in to go up. That is true. That is true. And he had made a little place here, there, and everywhere where he could rest. And he had it organised. Old Charlie organised. And you'd stop and have a rest. You'd have a pack on, and then you get up and we'll go again, boys. You never went alone. Always 2 or 3 in case of somebody got hooked up or caught up or something. In the reverse, the 99 out of 100 would think that you naturally put flour next to you for softness. Well, that was a real failure. Your flour went up on top. The flour was the last thing in the top of your, and you covered that to stop it from getting wet, right on the top of your bag. And sugar, if you had sugar, which we never, very rare, I don't think we packed sugar, I don't remember. But flour was a necessity, it had to be. And anything that got to be kept like that went on the top of the pack. The reason the flour was no good was that it was too hot. After a little while, the flour become, well, it was real hot on you. You wanted something that'd breathe, and tins was the best of the lot. Packed in nice in the bag. Yes. I think you pack them right, Pack it properly. Don't stop in. You stack them down so they go flat around you, fit around on your shoulders. And you get that, and you get your layer in back, and you put everything in the back of that. Then all sorts of, well, we'll say, if you're carrying bacon or whatever, it went in the back and up on top. And when I had my camera, he went on last. Went right up on top. With a flannel around him.
But you used to have to carry your pack well up on your back. If you let it drop down onto your hips, you was in trouble. You had to carry your pack well up onto your back, high.
Why was it a bugger of a place to pack into?
The Jane?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you had over the button grass and you had to take the wet. Where you went over the button grass, you stepped from one to the other, and if you went down between with a pack on you, well, if you didn't have somebody to help you, stopped there. Couldn't get your pack off, so you didn't go on your own. And that's what it was like then. What it was like after, I can only tell you what it was like in my day. You never went alone. There were always 2 or 3 of you went together to get to pack the pack. You didn't pack on your own.
I don't understand. Can you tell me why did you have to tread on the button grass? What was?
Well, it was that wet. The button grass, it was swampy ground. Not everywhere, man. No, only patches of it. You might have a patch of, I'll say, a chain or 2 chain of it. Swampy, wet. And it was, you could stick a stick down, push a stick down in the ground alongside the button grass. The button grass was solid. You could walk on it. Wobble about a bit, but you could walk on it. When you've got good legs and you're young and active, you don't worry about anything like. We used to cross the Franklin River. Charlie Abel put 3 strands of number 8 wire together, and I don't know how they pulled it up. Pulled it up with block and tackle. They must have done, because that's the only way. And to strengthen it up, and he put a walking thing across, and you was around about, if I remember rightly, he was around about 30 feet above the river where it crossed. And I think there's more to be told about it than what I'm doing. What I'm saying is correct. And you took it one at a time, and you had to steady yourself and shuffle yourself across on these 3 strands of wire. And you had a cage, sort of a cage to go across. If you got too much of a lay-up, you had to walk straight, you know. Now, that's how he crossed the Franklin River. He done that. Charlie Abel done that. Old Charlie.
Nielsen's were packing into the middle reaches of the Sprent River.
We had to pack our food, which was, we had to be careful in packing the food, because sometimes you would take too much, and you had to take as much as you could. We always had a little pair of scales for that sort of thing. Spring scales, like you see in sometimes a butcher's shop, and you'd weigh your pack. And the packs used to vary from 70 pounds to up as far as 90 pounds, 95 pound, according to how you felt and that sort of thing. That was how we used to get our stuff in there. And of course it wasn't only food, it was the things you used to have to use: axes, saws, wedges, tents, cooking materials, a few pots, even things to make your camp with. Make the chimney of your camp, which you used to try and get a couple of sheets of galvanised iron, drag it on end for you, make your chimney out of, so as it wouldn't catch a light. Oh, it was all labour and manhandle. You had to manhandle everything. There was nothing, no helicopters or anything to drop anything in for you.
As the Piners were away for up to 3 months at a time, careful consideration had to be given to the list of stores, both for keeping qualities and weight. Dried foods played a big part.
Sometimes I think we used to get some vegetables in compressed packets. You'd go for that sort of thing, and dried apples more than canned stuff, because tinned stuff used to be a little bit of a bother with when you used to have to pack it on your back, and you didn't get a lot out of a tin, whereas dehydrated vegetables seemed to be better. It had the nourishment, and it was a lot easier to pack, which was a big factor in them days.
When we decided to go back to the Gordon after probably 2 or 3 weeks break, we had to get together, of course, an order, and it would consist of maybe a bag of flour, maybe 2 bags, side of bacon, several cases of corned beef, mixed vegetables and steak and onions and that sort of stuff. Along, we would take carrots and parsnips and a bag of potatoes and plus a bit of macaroni, rice, and we would take enough to do us 3 months at a time. And because the bread, you had to make your own bread after the bit of bread that you took with you had gone. And we had a 16-inch camp oven and a 14-inch camp oven, depending on what we want to make. But if there was 4, you generally needed about a 16-inch camp oven each night. And it was made out of yeast, and the general form of you had to mix the yeast and let it ferment, and then after a few days, my brother was the best at doyle at starting the yeast going. He used to have sort of slabs of some sort of stuff, yeast, and he would put it in a milk bottle and 2 or 3 raisins and a little bit of flour. And sometimes it wouldn't kick off or something or other, and you'd have to do it again. But anyhow, once he got it working, he would leave a certain amount in the bottle to kick it off for the next night. And so you would mix and have real good yeast bread. It's better than the bread they make today, in my opinion. And beautiful big brown loaves of bread would come out of it.
And other piners around there seemed to take on the same thing later on, because they used to have to cook. Their bread used to consist of what they called dampers, and it was more or less a big scone. It used to fill the whole of your camp oven up, and of course after one day this damper, in my opinion, wasn't very nice to eat. But for years the old piners, they used to just have these dampers. It was made mostly of flour, baking powder and salt. I think that was the main ingredients of it. And bread, good yeast bread, was quite a luxury.
You make a fire with Huon Pine, start it up and stack the other on, and just burn. You never have to worry about it. And we used to stack a bit of leather wood, split up leather wood, especially for baking bread. For when it come bread night for the camp oven, you had to have a bed of coals. You know, and all the clothes had to be dried as well. The men's clothes would be hanging all around, and the last man who cooked the bread, he'd be finished. He'd have to stop up later than the other till the bread come up the camp oven. He took it off and took it out. But no trouble. The fire was no trouble whatsoever. I had worse troubles than that after I left where the pine was. I was supposed to be the cook. Well, to be the cook, I was taught certain things, and we had a lot of dried foods, dried vegetables and all sorts of things, and I come across these things in it. I didn't know what they were weevils. So what we done was we used to put them in the boiling water, and they come to the top, skim them off and use the vegetables. You wouldn't worry about a weevil attack. I didn't like them in the porridge, because you'd see the black colour, but in a stew you wouldn't notice them.
And all mostly tin tucker. Oh, Jesus, yeah. And you never got a bit of, you take as much meat as you could, but you had nothing to keep it. It wouldn't keep very long, you say. You had to keep it in the coolguardy safe for a while, but you'd soon use it up. And then it was tin ball for months and months, probably 3 months at a time before you got any fresh vegetables. We used to have a hunting dog. We'd catch a wallaby occasionally, or set a net and get a few fish out of the river.
we had a dog, and we would hunt the wallabies out of the forest and stand by on the rowing boat. Sometimes you have to go over, wrap it downstream or upstream or whatever, wherever the wallaby came in after it tired while the dog was chasing it, and you'd catch them swimming across the river. And on many occasions I've been on my own, and I've seen these wallabies on a hard time, and I used to swim down through these rapids with their heads straight up in the air, and I thought, well, if you're game enough to do that, I don't think I can kill you. So there was many ones that I let go, but yes, they were great eating to break away from the tinned meat that we had to put up with all the time we were there.
Tiger cats hunt wallaby, and they'll hunt them for sometimes 3 days. They can't catch them while the wallaby's fresh, but they wear them down. And one way the wallaby can escape is by jumping in the river and swimming the river, which they were quite good at. But the cats were not good, and they didn't like the water, and they didn't rarely jump into the water. And one day we were going back to camp, we saw this wallaby swimming across the river. Of course, he was unlucky, poor fellow. Dad rolled alongside him and collared him and killed him. Took him home and dressed him, and we had him for tea the next night. And that was a very good bit of fresh meat.
And it was like a stew?
No, we didn't. We braised them. Braised wallaby. That's the best way to eat the game, is to just a little bit of fat and water and camp oven and braise it slowly. And it's not baked, it's not boiled, it's just very nicely cooked.
Yeah. Well, you caught the wallaby, and you killed him, and you skinned him, cleaned him. There'd be plenty of flies around when you're doing all this. And as a matter of fact, you didn't have air guard or anything like that. But you had plenty of black pepper, the old black pepper. So you loaded him up with black pepper, and that killed the bombers. Or the little, yes, the bombs with the black heads on them. The blowflies on the Gordon River don't drop ordinary maggots. They drop them, they've already got black heads on them to get stuck into business. They're big uns. They're beauties. Yeah. No, that's right. And the black pepper played havoc with them, and it didn't affect nothing. And then if you cared to do it, you could smoke them, which old Charlie did smoke the wallaby. And we smoked it to keep it for a few days. Well, we used to put the pepper on them and that on him and hang the bugger up. Just hang him up and you'd see the flies on him with the millions. The flies would be on him, you'd think your meat would be ruined. But it didn't affect them because they blew them and the black pepper killed the maggots. I'll pronounce it nice. Then you clean him up with salt, plenty of salt. You always had plenty of salt. And you couldn't wish for better tucker. You could roast it or make a stew. If you always had plenty of bacon. If we run out of bacon, we were in big trouble, big trouble. Bacon was a main, but the bacon those days kept well. You could hang it up. You could hang bacon up out here. You could hang it up under a tree. It wouldn't, all it would do would go dry, but nothing would, it wouldn't go rotten.
He was a pretty good cook, my brother Doyle, and he'd probably put a couple of wallabies, legs, and with a bit of bacon and an onion cut up on it, and when I took the bread off, and he'd cover all the ashes up, and he would then get the wallabies steaming, and probably for half an hour before we went to bed, and he'd cover the ashes so it would just simmer away, and it would simmer away practically all night. And next morning, it'd be like better than chicken, actually, wallaby. We used to take it for sandwiches for lunch and different things.
We only had a bit of a short net. We'd put that in the river weekend, and not every weekend you couldn't get a chance, but some weekend you could get 2 or 3 salmon, Englishman, or round trout. Yeah, you had to do that to supplement your food.
Well, on a Sunday, especially out on the Jane, was a special day. We worked a 7-day week. But Sunday, my elder brother Charles would knock off early. He'd go home and cook a loaf of currant bread. And we would have hot currant bread and macaroni with a tin of condensed milk in it for sweets, And that was the highlight of the day or the week. That was a marvellous day. And we used to look forward to Sundays. Our currant bread and tin of milk. Mm.
I have eaten a wombat in a stew, which is not too bad.
How did you get him?
Well, we were clearing around a tree and a root, and we had to get down a bit low, and I was driving an axe down through, and it sort of, the roots seemed to be up a foot or so above the ground or something or other, and the axe broke through, and I don't know what sort of a mishap, a miracle it was, but it hit the badger in the head, the blade of the axe, and of course it killed it. And so we thought, well, we can't waste it, so we'll take it home and try it. So Doyle skinned it, and I think it took him about an hour to skin it, especially around the front part, but it was quite a good stew, actually.
The best meat of all was Angus's corn bully beef, because all his other meat was fat. But the corn stuff seemed to be better because you could tip the fat off the top of it. I used to make stews out of it, but if you cut the tin with an axe, you could cut it in half, you know, and let one part go one way and give your mate the other part. And providing you were really hungry, you didn't want any bloody... Well, butter was a thing we didn't have because we didn't bother with butter. Bacon fat was our butter. That was my butter, our butter. The bacon was fat them days, and you grilled it, and the bacon fat's quite good on bread, and even to this day, the good bacon fat is nice on bread with honey, and there was plenty of honey in the Huon Pine.
How did you light a fire up there? Because this is one of the wettest places in the world there. I mean, it just...
No problem.
What wasn't a problem?
Huon Pine burns well. Huon Pine's great burn stuff. You only had to go up to, you went up to a green tree and you peel a whittle. You know what a whittle is? Can I demonstrate? Well, you get a bit of pine, you have a sharp knife. You always carried your sharp knife. As a matter of fact, I've got one in me now in case I need it. You have a whittle, you whittle like that, don't take it right off. You keep going like that, make a lot of little shavings, sort of. And it'll be pouring with rain. Pouring with rain. And you whittle down, you whittle with it. And you have your wax matches, waterproof matches. You could throw them in the water, they float around. You could take them out and rub them in your hair or rub them on the dry patch of your pants and strike them and away they go. They make a hell of a stink and a lot of smell with them. And very dangerous where there's rats and mice. They'd chew them and probably caught a fire, but they couldn't hurt nothing up there because there's nothing to bloody, you know, wouldn't have to worry about rats and mice, only old native rats. But you asked me that, that was a simple thing to light a fire, very simple. And the green wood, leather wood and myrtle and whitey wood, or horizontal, any of those woods, we burnt them all green. That's something we had, and that was Charlie Abel got me, he showed me that. You had a bit of Huon Pine root, full of oil. See, the oil's in the root. And you carry this little piece of root with you. It's funny looking bit of... you lean over, strike a match and light it, and it'll burn like bugger, and you light your fire and get it going, blow it out and put it back in your knapsack. And not knapsack, in your tucker bag. Carry it with you. Just a bit of wood, full of oil. But as for cooking and baking, that was always done at night. That was always done at night. You know, you done it in the camp at night. Sometimes you'd have a fancy of cooking up something special for Sunday dinner, but put a crust on a bloody stew made of bully beef. Bacon and bully beef and onions, if you had onions. If you didn't have them, well, you couldn't eat them, could you? So you put whatever you could in the stew and put a crust on it. A crust on a case and a bit of coal on the lid and till you were nice. They were nice, yeah. That's Sunday.
Yeah.
You'd be working within earshot of your other mates, sometimes another mate, sometimes two mates. And they'd be working on their own only when they'd call on you to give them assistance with their logs. You'd work till you had time to get home before dark. and do the few chores that had to be done around the camp. The cook would go a little bit earlier. The one that used to have the chores of carrying water up from the river in 2 cans. We used to get our petrol and our kerosene in 2 cans in them days, and it used to be used quite often with carrying buckets and that sort of thing. The other one would have to cut wood for the fire, which had to be going nearly all night. And you'd just get home in time for each one to do their chores and settle down before dark, before you'd start eating your tea. You'd change your clothes into something a bit drier. Certainly nothing to look at, but comfortable. And then, of course, you'd be tired enough to go to sleep straight away. It took no rocking to go to sleep. Yeah.
The piners' camps could be rough and ready structures, usually made of recycled materials. This is the camp at Pine Cove, where Bob was camped through the frosts of 36.
I was on the top bunk, and the damn frost, and the fire melted the ice on the roof, and the damn drips had dropped down on me. All the damn water, yeah, your bed would be wet and everything. Not real good. The camps we had at Cameron's Flat was, they was nice huts because they could cart the timber there to make a wooden hut. But at Spring Creek we only had tent pitched on a frame sort of thing and walled in on the sides. Nice and warm, not much room in the buggers though. And damn tiger cats could get in.
We didn't have huts. After that fire there was no huts. I don't know what they've done of late years, but there was no fire, no huts up where we were pulling logs. We had tents. We used the iron and bits and pieces, whatever was left, and built it up like that. And you had a fire was the width, one tent was used, with 2 tents, one on each end. One was used for a cookhouse and eat, another went for a sleep house. And you'd have one, you put the tents up on a bag around the bottom, put them up a bit higher, so you could have one bit above the other. Yeah, the bloke sleeping down there, and another step up and get into his bunk at night. That was a double bed. That was 4 and one on each side, and one in a double in the end. You could put 6 in a 14 by. Jesus, what were they? 14 by 20, I think, or something. 10 by 14. That's right. 14 foot long and 10 foot wide. You'd put 6 men in one of them. Put him up so you put 6 men in him. And between the 2 tents is where the fire was. Big wide fire. And that was where, well, you just cooked and lived there.
In a rainforest, you never get a cold wind. It's only when you get up on the hills, but when you're down in the gullies, you don't get that cold wind. And there's always a plentiful supply of wood. Even when you can't get dry wood, the green leather wood and the green melaleucas, they'll burn green after you just get them started. Yeah. No, you're never cold, never cold. You always have fires, plenty of fire, and plenty of wood for the fire. You was always damp. You had to live with dampness, but you had your tents that way and you camped that way, that your fire, you relied on your fire. They used to talk about putting a chimney on their huts, on their bush huts. Well, the chimney was nearly half as big as the camp, because you had the fire in the middle. It was of wood, sometimes used to catch a light. But you could walk around it and hang your clothes up, and they'd dry overnight. Your clothes would always dry overnight.
They'd be stiff next day, but they'd be dry.
The outside flannel was more important than the pants, I suppose. We used to wear 2 flannels, Waverley flannel. The top one used to be the oldest, and it used to be more or less smoke dried, which used to help turn the rain, and you could still work in it. Oilskins and that sort of thing was more or less out because you couldn't work in them. A flannel could get wet and you could still work in the flannel, and it would turn the rain. That seems to be the usual, the norm for most of them, the men that used to work up in them places at the time. Oh yes, yeah, we started in tent. We always had to start with a tent. Sometimes you'd make your tent a little bit higher, because the tents in them days wasn't the 6 foot. You couldn't walk about in them like they are now, those low tents. And what you had to do, you had to supplement it and make the walls a little bit higher on the bottom with a few short paling. And you more or less put your tent over a temporary frame of light spars and stuff, and it fitted over and was more like a hut than a tent. This used to do until such times as we used to split a few paling and make a paling hut. We always carried a paling knife. Huon Pine never split very well as a rule. King William Pine split very easily. Beautiful splitting stuff, King Billy Pine. But sometimes you had to carry the King Billy from the top of a hill, and it was quite a long carry. You used to get used to it though, carrying King paling on your back. You'd put them one on each shoulder and more or less lap them at the back of you. 6 foot, you could carry 6 foot paling like that.
The horses had Sunday off, but the men were rarely idle.
It was a day of wash-up day, a clean-up day, and oftentimes you'd have to put something off. For instance, if some of the harness had to be repaired, well, it worked out if you was having a bit of a bad trot, you'd have to do it of a Sunday. But it's not always the case, no. But it was put aside. Shoeing horses, for instance, if they hadn't been, something went wrong, well, you didn't get them done, well, you'd have Sunday. But that wasn't always, no, not always. Mainly Sunday was a day of rest and bugger around, or go and catch a... go and catch but as for cooking and baking, that was always done at night. That was always done at night, you know, you done it in the camp at night. Sometimes you'd have a fancy of cooking up something special for Sunday dinner, but put a crust on a bloody stew made of woolly beef.
There was no strict rules. Of course, you left your door open to anybody, and you always expected them to leave it as they found it, and mainly with some dry brushwood, so as you could get a fire going. That was your main thing. Leave some dry brushwood and that sort of thing, and so as you could get a fire going. That was one of the main things, because you'd be often wet and cold, and when you'd come to a camp that was disused, like you never ever pulled a camp down, you always left it where you built it. And that was always a bit of a haven, like for a dry bed for somebody.
Some of them was great poem and storytellers. Of a night time in the camp, Uncle Jim Doherty and my dad, they'd get this. I'd be washing up after tea, and they'd settle down with their cigarettes, one on each side of the big fireplace. We had a big roaring fire going. And I couldn't get washed up washing the dishes and that, and sweep the camp out and that quick enough to settle down in between them, listen to their tales. Uncle Jim might say, I say, Jack, remember something happened at the Spine Cop up in the river? Oh, yes, Dad was saying. Away they'd go, telling stories, you see. And it was that interesting. And, oh, gee, it was beaut. They'd say the same thing when they get up to Strawn, and I might be in the pub, and years later, when they're retired and everything, might see one another, and they'd start to talk about these things, what had happened, you see. And next thing, all the crowd would be listening to their tales. Yeah, it was great. And Uncle Jim and they could make up poems, real bush poems, you know, about what happened and so forth and so. So the only thing I can remember, a part of a poem Uncle Jim used to recite, was about the Finns. They was a great bush family. And the only piece of it I can remember is just a few words that went like, Long Jim crept from his pine rail bunk and smiled at the Desmond lad. And I can't think of the rest of it. Yeah. Jim Finn was a great old bushman, and Des was one of his sons, but that's all that's the only damn part of it I can remember. It was a good poem too. And that's the sort of things they used to make up and different, yeah.
Fungus grows on myrtle trees, and it eats the wood, it eats the sap and kills the tree. It takes a long, long time, but it dies and stands up in the middle of the forest, one straight stalk standing straight up in the air, no limbs, nothing, just a dead trunk sticking up. We used to call them the widowmakers. They'd fall after rain, but they wouldn't make a sound. They just fall. The first thing you knew about them was a thump when they hit the ground. And that was quite frightening. We never used to camp under widowmakers. We always made sure that there was no myrtle standing around us, there was no branches on it. But when they fell, they created a new, complete forest of their own. The sunlight come in where the trees fell from. And then you saw fairy bushes and little myrtles and ferns and things growing that you never saw normally. And you get attracted to that. You become fond of a patch of new green scrub. They're very nice.
And glowworms, they're things that I haven't heard mention of. The glowworms in little corners, glowworms, like all lit up like little lights. And I asked my brother one day he said, they're glowworms, one. He said, they're not. I thought, you couldn't catch anything. You couldn't go to get it. There was nothing to get. A little glowworm, and they're in the river. They'll be there still. In the bush. Not anywhere, but in a little sort of a nook where horizontal grew, and it was dark, semi-dark. These glowworms. And they were pretty.
But to stop you sometimes, you'd be walking through the bush and all of a sudden you'd see a fairy bush in front of you and you'd stop, just amazed at the look of it. There'd be millions of sparkling dew raindrops hanging on the fronds. I think they'd be finer than the maidenhair fern, and they hold millions of little drops and they sparkle like diamonds. And they'd stop you in your track. You couldn't go past them. You'd have to stop and look at it. It was just amazing. They're one of the good sights that you see. Well, have you seen or heard of the Marble Cliffs or the Angel Cliffs in those places? They used to look very nice. You'd come up the river, it's quite calm, and there'd be the reflection of the cliffs in the water. In the Franklin, there'd be the veranda cliffs in the Franklin. They'd have the same impression. And then sometimes in the dead of winter, there'd be snow on the mountains. And you'd get the reflection in the river of the mountains and the snow, and that'd stop you, and you'd have to look at that. You couldn't just go past that. You'd just stop and look.